I'm Beth Poteet, and I work with Witness for Peace and the Oregon Youth Sanctuary Movement. And I'm a member of Ainsworth United Church of Christ on their Justice Commission, and we've met before. And we just had a farmer from Oaxaca, Mexico here on a speaker tour. He spoke in Washington, Oregon for 2 weeks to about 2,000 people, sharing the message of how NAFTA has been devastating for the rural economy in Oaxaca and throughout Mexico because of U.S. subsidized agricultural products that have been dumped on the Mexican economy, then forcing basically people to migrate. And from Oaxaca, in some communities, 50 to 80% of the people, since NAFTA was passed, have left, creating basically ghost towns throughout Oaxaca. And this is directly related to NAFTA, and we're seeing the same thing now happen in Central America. Witness for Peace has staff members in Mexico, Nicaragua, and Colombia. We're also very much opposed to the Panama Free Trade Agreement because of what everyone's saying here. And personally, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of hosting people on these speakers tours and taking delegations to Latin America where we're hearing the same thing over and over again, that this policy is basically creating and further impoverishing people, and not only abroad, but also in our country. And I'm tired of it. And I want Earl Blumenauer, as all of our representative, to take a stand against this. It's ridiculous that he continues to side with corporations who, instead of the people. I mean, that's not his job, in my opinion, and I think pretty much everyone here shares that. His job is to represent us as his constituents. So I just really want to make that very clear, that that's our position. And also, I'm going to Mexico in less than a week, to Oaxaca and the U.S.-Mexico border region, to look at these issues, again, firsthand, and John actually is going with me, along with several others from Portland, so we'll be in touch with you about that, too.
But Panama is a notorious tax haven for American corporations that offshore their profits. And if we rush to passing the Panama Free Trade Agreement, that could lock in that procedure and make it much more difficult to address those issues.
I'm John Munson. I'm the Executive Director of the Oregon Farm Worker Ministry. I was also a Peace Corps volunteer in rural Panama back in the 60s, and I worked with peasant farmers, most of whom had maybe 3rd, 4th, 5th grade education. We formed cooperatives. I was back there last March, and the cooperatives are still operating. Some of the same people are operating them because they don't have Social Security in Panama. So if you were in your late 60s or early 70s, if you've been a farmer, you have to be a farmer because there's no other choice. And I know from experience and experiencing these people that if the Panama Free Trade Act is passed, that will be the end of their ability to sell their crops at a price that they can afford, and it will be devastating for them.
We know that Earl Blumenauer worked on the Peru Trade Agreement, and we are very aware that the Peru Trade Agreement is not a step. Is not the fair trade that we're looking for. And we have to be very clear about that. The Panama Trade Agreement is in the same model as the Peru Trade Agreement. It has some small cosmetic modifications of NAFTA and CAFTA, but it does not constitute fair trade because they don't give for instance, they have the International Labor Organization general principles, but Peru Trade Agreement and the Panama Trade Agreement and the Colombia Trade Agreement do not have the conventions, the precedent in law that is needed to really enforce a trade agreement and give it labor and environmental protections. So that we do not want to hear, and we'll be very tired of hearing, well, we now have a better version of a trade agreement because we have these new protections as in the Peru Trade Agreement. That will still make us feel tired. That will still make us feel like we have a lot to push against.
And we'd like him to address the specific things that everyone has talked about here. For instance, why does he not support the Trade Act? We need him to communicate with us as to why he's taking these positions. And be specific, and not, as Lori had said, just use the smoke and mirrors of saying that these protections have been added when it's proven that they're not going to really protect anybody.
He's taking a position against us in favor of the
against the people that voted him in.
Right.
And in fact, there's so many of us that we represent, and we're just a little piece of it. But we put him in, we've supported him, we've agreed with him on a lot of things, but this is so puzzling, confounding, that he continues down this road to support big business.
And it's so fundamental.
corporations.
So fundamental.
Well, and he looks at each trade agreement that comes up very carefully. He hasn't articulated a position on the Panama agreement yet. It hasn't yet been scheduled for a vote, so it is something that there's sort of increased discussion about in DC right now. But it's not at the point where it's a done deal. So we're monitoring it, we're looking at it.
It's in his committee though.
Yeah.
It's
We're-
his committee that's gonna
That's right.
start it, so he needs to let us know what he's gonna do.
And
Right, we
he's
don't want him
meeting
to
with
wait
a
for it to
variety of
come
people
up.
on both sides of it. So
Yeah, and what Dave is saying, I think, is that we don't want to wait for it to come up for a vote before he takes a stand. He needs to take a stand early on
Yeah.
so that it won't come up for a vote.
Yeah.
It shouldn't come up for a vote. In a Congress that's a Democratic-controlled Congress with a Democratic president, this should not come up for a vote. I mean, under a Republican Congress with a Republican president, things that we want wouldn't come up for a vote. This shouldn't even come up for a vote.
A lot of members ran on the no more NAFTA promise, including Obama. He said, we'll go back and take a look at NAFTA. So I personally feel betrayed that he's not only not going back to look at it, but also pushing more forward. So the fact that Panama's even coming up is appalling.